When someone you cared about suddenly goes silent, especially someone you had a deep connection with, the emotions can be overwhelming. The silence itself speaks loudly. It can create confusion, self-doubt, sadness, and even anger. But when that silence is finally broken, and she reaches out after days, weeks, or even months of distance, you're faced with a critical moment. How you respond can either pull you back into an old cycle or propel you forward into the person you've become during that silence. And this is why you must not react emotionally, but instead respond intentionally. Emotional reactions are natural. After all, you're human. If you cared deeply, her absence left a mark. The moment her name flashes across your screen, your mind may flood with old memories, old wounds, and perhaps even hope. You may want to respond with relief or unleash the frustration you've been holding in. But here's the truth. Emotional reactions rarely serve your highest good. They are raw, impulsive, and often lead to outcomes you later regret. That initial wave of feelings, it's not truth, it's a test, and your power lies in passing that test by choosing mindfulness over impulse. Responding intentionally means giving yourself the space to evaluate why she's reaching out now. People don't break silence randomly, there's usually a reason, and it might not always be the one you want to believe. Maybe she's lonely, maybe someone else let her down. Maybe curiosity got the better of her. Or maybe, just maybe, she truly reflected during her silence and realized what she lost. The point is, you need clarity before you hand over access to your emotions again. Don't let the desire for closure blind you to the reality of the situation. Take a moment, breathe. Let yourself feel what you feel, but don't act on it immediately. That space between stimulus and response is where your maturity lives. It's where your growth resides. That's where a strong man steps into his power. You've spent time becoming more grounded, more focused, more self-aware. Don't throw that progress away by being pulled back into chaos you've already survived. Instead of reacting with desperation, anger, or blind excitement, choose to be calm. Ask yourself key questions. What do I really want from this interaction? What does her message say about her intentions? Does it align with the direction I'm headed in life? These questions anchor you. They remind you that you are no longer the person waiting by the phone for validation. You're the man who learned how to validate himself. If her message seems vague, like hey, or I was thinking about you, don't assume it's a grand gesture. People often reach out because something in their world is shifting, not necessarily because they've changed. This is why intentionality is everything. You can choose to respond with curiosity, but keep your center. You can acknowledge her without reopening wounds. You don't have to ignore her to protect yourself, but you also don't need to offer instant forgiveness or an open door. Your tone, your words, your energy, it all communicates more than you realize. If you decide to respond, let it reflect your evolution. Be polite but firm. Be kind but clear. Don't act cold, but also don't warm up too quickly. This moment isn't about making her comfortable. It's about honoring your journey. You've grown stronger through the silence. You've rebuilt your self-worth. This is your time to stand in that strength, not abandon it the second someone reappears. Sometimes responding intentionally means asking direct questions. What made you reach out now? Or what are you hoping for from this conversation? You're not interrogating, you're setting a standard. You're showing that access to your heart now requires honesty and intention. If she can't meet you there, then maybe silence was a gift, not a punishment. And yes, there's a temptation to fall back into the comfort of familiarity. Responding with self-respect also means asking yourself, what am I hoping to get out of this? If your answer is closure, be honest. Is she the kind of person who ever gave you closure before? If your answer is reconciliation, ask, has she shown any meaningful change or just curiosity? And if your answer is simply to be kind, then ask, can you be kind without being naive? This is not about punishing her. This is about honoring yourself. If someone disappears without explanation, they should not be allowed to re-enter your life without accountability. That doesn't mean you need an apology or dramatic explanation, but it does mean you expect emotional responsibility. You expect effort. You expect a conversation that reflects growth when she finally reaches out after a period of silence. It's natural for a flood of emotions to rise within you. But beyond your initial reaction, you need to understand the importance of emotional detachment. This doesn't mean you've stopped caring or that you're cold. It means you've learned how to create space between your feelings and your decisions. It's about responding, not reacting. And it's one of the most powerful tools you can develop when facing someone who once left you in confusion. You see, emotional detachment isn't about closing your heart, it's about opening your eyes. It's about recognizing that the same person who is now texting you, calling you, or appearing in your life again once made a conscious decision to become silent. And that silence wasn't just a moment, it was a statement. So now, when they return, it's not your responsibility to make them feel better about that decision. Your responsibility is to protect your peace. Too many people let their emotions drive them back into unhealthy dynamics. You might think, maybe she missed me, or maybe she realized she made a mistake, and maybe she did. But emotional detachment allows you to assess that possibility without losing yourself in it. You can acknowledge her return without placing your self-worth in her presence. That's the shift. You go from needing her validation to evaluating whether her energy is even something you want back in your life. Emotional detachment is a form of self-mastery. When you practice it, you're no longer moved by breadcrumbs of attention or sudden displays of affection that come without consistency. You stop seeing her message as a lifeline and start seeing it for what it is, just a message. Nothing more, nothing less. You gain the ability to observe, not absorb. You become still in your response instead of reactive in your emotions. When you don't rush to reply, when you don't fall back into old scripts, when you don't let nostalgia rewrite the past, you're practicing emotional detachment. And what you'll realize is that the longer you stay centered in that state, the clearer things become. You start to remember why you stopped chasing. You recall the nights you spent wondering why she vanished and how you pulled yourself through without her. That memory is important. Don't erase it just because she decided to reappear. It's also key to understand that emotional detachment doesn't make you weak in love. It makes you wiser. Love is not blind loyalty. It's not ignoring red flags or history for the sake of temporary connection. True love requires awareness to be the most. It asks you to be fully present, not only to the other person but to yourself. And when someone returns after a period of silence, you have to ask yourself if they're ready to meet the new version of you. The version who has healed, grown, and no longer tolerates emotional immaturity. This is your test. And emotional detachment is your strength. You don't have to slam the door shut. You can listen. You can even be kind. But you must stay rooted in what you've learned. If she can't show up with clarity, consistency, and effort, then her return is nothing more than a distraction. Let that be clear in your energy. You don't have to say it aloud. People feel when your energy has shifted. They sense when the person they left behind has evolved into someone who no longer seeks closure, because they've already closed the chapter themselves. You also have to understand that sometimes, when people come back, they're not coming back to stay. They're checking if the door is still open. And emotional detachment gives you the strength to keep the door closed if that's what's best for your peace. You can forgive without re-inviting chaos. You can be civil without being vulnerable again. That's your power now. You have the control to decide how the story ends this time. So when she reaches out, take a deep breath. Let your emotions rise, but don't let them take over. Reflect on the journey you've taken without her, the growth, the clarity, the inner strength you developed, and then choose to respond from that place, not from old wounds, but from new wisdom. Because that's the difference between healing and pretending. Healing changes your behavior, not just your mood. Ultimately, emotional detachment allows you to see her return not as a victory or a loss, but as a test of your growth. Can you stay grounded in your truth when temptation calls? Can you choose peace over chaos, even when chaos is familiar? That's the real strength. That's what proves you've transformed. And if you can do that, if you can face her return with calm, clarity, and control, then you've already won. Not because you got her back, but because you never lost yourself again. When you're faced with someone returning after leaving you in silence, one of the most empowering things you can do is choose self-worth over validation. It sounds simple, but in reality, it's one of the most difficult things to practice, especially when your emotions want to believe that the return means something significant. Maybe they suddenly miss you. Maybe they realized your value. Maybe they're lonely. Whatever the reason, their reappearance can trigger old hopes. But this is exactly where you must pause, reflect, and ask yourself, am I about to act from a place of healed confidence or hidden desperation? Choosing self-worth over validation is the difference between repeating a cycle and breaking one. It means that instead of asking, why did they come back? You ask, do I even want them back? And that small shift in focus puts you back in control. Suddenly, you're no longer waiting to be chosen. You're doing the choosing. You're not trying to prove your worth to them. You're protecting the worth you've already discovered in yourself. When someone reaches out after they've been silent, your first instinct might be to feel relief. That ache of being ignored or forgotten finally feels seen. But self-worth reminds you that silence was a choice too. They didn't lose your number. They didn't forget how to speak. They chose absence, and your growth came from surviving that absence. Now that they've returned, the temptation is to seek answers, apologies, or reassurance. But self-worth doesn't chase closure. It creates it internally. And this is where real transformation happens. You stop needing someone else to explain themselves. You stop looking for your healing in their words. Instead, you recognize that your value was never dependent on how they treated you. It was revealed in how you chose to respond when they didn't. Too often, people who ghost, disappear, or go silent return expecting access to the same version of you they left. But self-worth means you've evolved. You've upgraded, you've healed wounds they never apologized for. And now that they're back, they're not talking to the same person. So when they text, hey, when they call out of nowhere, when they start liking your photos again, pause, take a deep breath, and remind yourself you are not obligated to open that door again. They had access once, and they walked away. Your healing isn't a revolving door for their confusion. Instead, let your self-worth guide your response. And sometimes the most powerful response isn't words, it's boundaries. You can respond with grace, but grace doesn't mean access. You can be kind, but kindness doesn't mean reconciliation. You can listen, but listening doesn't mean letting them back in. Every boundary you hold is a declaration. I am not who I was when you left. It's also important to realize that self-worth doesn't come from how someone else views you. It's how you view yourself when no one is watching. Do you respect your standards, even when your heart wants to make exceptions? Do you honor your peace, even when you miss the person who once disturbed it? These are the silent moments where your worth is either reinforced or compromised. And the person returning after silence is simply a mirror. They reveal how much you've truly grown, or how quickly you'll trade your healing for temporary affection. Choosing self-worth also teaches you to let go of fantasies. Not every return means reconciliation. Not every text means transformation. Sometimes people come back out of curiosity, boredom, or comfort, not because they're ready to be better. And self-worth gives you the courage to say, I deserve more than maybe. You start to crave clarity over chemistry, effort over excuses, and presence over promises. Even if part of you still cares, you learn that care without self-respect is sacrifice. You can love someone and still walk away. You can have history with someone and still not invite them into your future. You can miss someone and still know they're not right for you. That's what self-worth does. It helps you see the full picture, not just the moments that feel good. So when she comes back after silence, ask yourself, is she adding to your life or disrupting it? Is her presence consistent or is it just convenient? Does she see you clearly now, or is she still in love with the version of you who didn't know your own value? These aren't harsh questions, they're necessary ones, because the answer will show you whether you're choosing growth or slipping into old patterns. Self-worth gives you the final say. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer wait for validation. And you certainly don't base your decisions on someone's momentary change of heart. You choose peace, you choose alignment, you choose you. And when you do that, when you stand firm in the life you've built, the confidence you've earned, and the healing you've walked through, there's no need to fear someone's return, because you know now you're not the one who lost. You're the one who rose.